Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest stream. While I click all the way to the bank. Alright, morning Rainbow, Pandaria. Hope you're all doing well. Extadster, good morning, good afternoon, or whatever it may be for you. Hope you're having a great one. Busy doing all the links and clickety-clicks. So, there we go. Hope everyone is enjoying their apparent public holiday. Labor Day or something? Maybe? My wife told me yesterday. That was like at least 12 hours ago. I have no idea. I'm glad to hear that, Rainbow, and thank you for the kind words. I'm glad to hear that, Dadster. It's always good. Wow, we reached our goal. Yarg! Thank you very much for the booty that we shall add to our treasure hoard. It is much appreciated, why not, Guitar? Yarg! It's always better when they give you the money and you don't have to go and kill. Thank you very much. It's very much appreciated. Why not, Guitar? But I'm glad you enjoy the content, and I hope you also have a good one. I don't know why that image makes me laugh, but it does. A wine glass with chocolate milk. That is the epitome of adulthood. Right, sharing the links. Linkety link, linkety link. Okay. Twitch. Come here, Twitch. Kandaria, we're still not there. I'm still trying to recover the missing day, because we had a day of no narrations due to power outages. So today is going to be TFOS, tomorrow will be re-TFOS, and then Sunday will probably be more Space Trucker. Trucker. I'm just telling my wife, it's amazing how out of all the words that I speak, trucker is the one that seriously shows my South African accent. Trucker. And it's not like I have a very South African accent. My accent's quite British for South Africa, if that makes any sense. But trucker, for some reason, comes out with a rolled R on both beginning and end. Okay. Okie dokie. Doggo is here again, holding me down so I don't float away. Still having problems with not my lips, but the corners of my mouth. I'm not sure what's causing that. Although the heat stroke wouldn't have helped. Dehydration. Clickety click, clickety click. What are we on? Doing TFOS today. 2751. Good morning, Shadow. Hope you're doing well today. On this fine Labor Day, night, morning, whatever it may be. As you can see, I'm not really doing the whole public holiday thing. Good morning, Lazy Comet. Hope you're feeling well. Oh, feeling well. Doing well. I need to take my laptop apart and clean all the vents. No, I haven't read that series. With reading being my job, I don't tend to do a lot of personal reading anymore. Good morning, Breach Creeper. How you doing? It also looks remarkably like a romance-related story, and I just don't like romance as a genre. Not my thing. So yeah, Not that I'm not motivated. I'm just still recovering from the heat stroke. And I'm tired. So, these things happen. But fear not. I'm a consummate professional. I shall narrate with all the energy that I can. Really? But yes, I'm going to need to take my laptop apart and clean all the vents. Because it's definitely making too much noise. Maybe even get a... it's going to create more noise. An additional fan for it. The always battle of noise versus function. Lack of sleep is also normal for me. However, since becoming a voice person, my doctors say that I have to get 8 hours of sleep, so... Oh, trust me. I take I take as much care of myself as I can. But I've been an insomniac since I was 16. So there's only so much sleep I can do. The heat stroke was unavoidable. But such things happen. But I did take some painkillers for my sprained ankle. My hip is also acting up, which I imagine is related to the sprained ankle, because it's the hip on the other side. So, it makes sense. But other than that, we're good. So, for those of you that are new to the live streams, I am cursed. I don't mean this in a very ethereal way. We've got very good evidence that I am cursed. Whenever I get more than a week ahead on my recordings, something happens. This week it happened to take out 2 countries' power. But I get sick, I fall downstairs, I have a power outage, you know, those sorts of things. So whenever I get a week ahead, stuff happens. Renegade, if I'm not taking pills, I get about 4 hours of sleep. And I spiral into a weird sleeping pattern, like completely destroys everything. Not destroys, but it spirals quickly. Yeah, it's gamer subs, random flavor. It's basically caffeine, not water, because I don't like water. So it makes it taste like not water and puts caffeine in my body, which is always good. The curse. Good morning, Postmatic. Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. My meds are okay. I don't really get full 8 hours, but I get enough. Enough that it helps my voice. So, I mean, that's the thing. If I don't get enough sleep, my voice is trashed. since starting this as a job, I've kind of had to become a little bit of a diva with my voice, which drives me up the fucking wall. So I was like, well, I'm not allowed to eat spicy food because that gives me acid reflux. I have to get my 8 hours sleep, otherwise my voice sucks. And it makes sense when you think, my voice is how I put food on the table. But it's still, coming from a trade family, it's like,
Oh no, my voice. What shall I ever do if I hurt my poor precious voice?
good mornings, Kings, Wingate. Business is business. It's down, but it's down for everyone at the moment. So nothing specifically related to me. Everybody got that pandemic boost, and now we're all been free falling till try get a baseline again.
My precious, my...
But fair enough. Look, I'm trying to avoid another voice surgery, because I don't think they can do another voice surgery. Look, nobody in my family has made fun of the voice thing. It's just the way I feel about it. My family's pretty chill. It's like, okay, so you make money off your voice. Cool. Are you making money? Yes. Cool. Can you put food on the table? Yes. Cool. So, my family don't really care. And none of them have said anything. It's just the way I even went to trade school. So, broken fingers, arms, cuts, bruises. And now I have to be pedantic about my voice. Good morning, Anthony. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, my family's pretty chill. Look, if I was not making money, there would be words. But, I can make a living doing this, so they're chill with that. My parents have always been kind of like that. Okay, but can you make a money doing that? And if the answer is yes, then cool. Yeah, that's true, Shadow. That's true. Look, we weren't a hardcore working family where it's like, you have to do a trade. It was like, what do you want to do? The funny thing is, when I was in school, I wanted to do this thing. It was very risky. It was very new. My parents were obviously very, very worried because there was no history behind this profession. But I was very much into this profession. And we had these kinds of conversation. Can you make money off of it? Where do you think you can go? Reasonable questions for parents to ask. This strange new field that I was going into was called... Are you sitting down? Information technology. So, we did that song and dance when I was in high school. Where I was going to make money. Is this going to be around? So when the voice acting thing happened, good morning, Captain No Name. King, the C word, in England is Not nearly as bad. I don't know about throughout the rest of us, for rest of Europe. It's more America that's very anti that word. If I say it, YouTube will put the rubber glove on and go digging, if you catch my meaning. And in Australia, it's basically like breathing. I personally don't have a problem with the word, but like I said, I came from a trade family, so there are pros and cons to that. Well, I mean, the blackout ended. It was 11 hours. I'm glad there wasn't anything worse happening around. Sounds like one of the bearings in the fan and the computer starting to go. Different people react to that word differently. I don't think... Well, I think YouTube channels should be able to be set themselves as adult only, and not in like a sexual context, just like we use big words, or big adult words. But the moment you set a video to 18 plus, it is no ad revenue, there is nothing. Doesn't get shared or anything like that. So, I mean, it would be awesome if I could swear, because swearing is part of HFY to a degree. But I've had to curb that. All right. I think it's time. We're heading... Are you okay? You gonna snore some more? There's a dog on my lap, by the way. So when I'm staring down at my crotch, I'm not actually staring at my crotch, I'm looking at the dog. No, I sat at the kiddie table. It was much more fun. It wasn't round, it was more of a triangle. But it was still fun. The old chairs hurt my knees, but we managed. We're on extra snore duty today. Okie dokie. Time for narrations. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves while I narrate. I do keep an eye on chat, and I will respond as appropriate. Greetings, ladies and metal-gents, and welcome to this latest narration of the webstore. Greetings, ladies and metal-gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Misdemeanors, written by Lonius, okay. The Lonius Howl. Sedestra was fact. Every single one of the small ships on the concourse had Sedestra was fact. Every single one of the small ships on the concourse had armed guards, because on a station that housed vandals, every ship on the concourse would need armed guards, lest some wayward vandal attempt to stow away. And that's exactly what Sedestra was. A vandal. One of a species of thieves and malcontents, turncoats and opportunists. A species that was so looked down upon that, after the repression campaign, were stripped of their history, their identity, even their very name, only to be labeled as a galactic hoodlums. Sedestra had done everything she possibly could to break the mold. In fact, until today, she had never so much as broken a rule in her life. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. She was a vandal, and the galaxy would only ever see her as a vandal. So being visibly a vandal on the deck of guarded ships and about enough time for a smoke before the customs security. So, being visibly a vandal on a deck of guarded ships and about enough time for a smoke before the customs security office caught wind of unauthorized personnel in the concourse meant that she was undoubtedly thanked. It wasn't fair, though life rarely is. She had near starved herself at half rations to buy information from her fellow workers. She had spent every last credit she had, begged, borrowed, and scrounged to bribe her level's caretakers. She had spent every last credit she had begged, borrowed, and scrounged to bribe her level's caretakers in order to get this far, and it was looking that all of that effort would likely be for naught. Right now she needed a miracle, a goddamn ex machina. Right now she needed a miracle, a goddamn ex machina. She needed that. Guarding one of the ships at the far side of the concourse stood a being that she had never seen before. It wasn't like she was privy to all of the races in the galaxy, being as she was simply a factory floor worker that wasn't actually allowed to leave the station. But this particular one looked sorely out of place. It had no iridescent scales, no colorful feathers, hardly any fur, and no prominent crests displaying. Monotonous in shade, Good morning, Alpha Noob. Hope you're doing well. I came to fight for my freedom. There you go. Morning, Phoenix. Monotonous in shade, unadorned by biological markers, this creature looked absolutely exotic because of its blackness, and that made it stick out. Really, phone? The being seemed to be exhibiting behavior that also wasn't in line with its fellow guards. While most were familiar with the generally secure atmosphere of Erod Gol Station, they were lounging around, swapping stories or jokes. Some were even drinking. This one, while not entirely on edge, was more alert and cognizant of its surroundings. This would have to be her salvation. If it looked out of place, if it acted out of place, with any modicum of luck, it would be out of place and therefore unfamiliar with the prejudices that permeated the periphery. Remember what Tim taught you, she thought to herself. Walk with purpose. Don't stop and gawk. It'll be too obvious. Don't dart trying to keep cover. It'll be too conspicuous. Walk like you belong here. It may just be you. It may just buy you some extra time. She strode exposed in the open onto the concourse, one foot in front of the other, subconsciously wondering if she was trembling as much as externally as she was internally. Not that it really mattered, though. She had a possible means of escape. She focused solely on the entity and the ship it was guarding. By now, some of the others milling about had undoubtedly noticed her presence, and she could feel the cold, hard glares driving into her skull. She could see, in her peripheral vision, other guards become more alert, moving closer to weapons or simply staring her down. She did everything in her power to ignore the hushed whispers and avert insults that were directed towards her. lest they fully break the crumbling facade that she was putting on. As she approached the ship, the being's attention snapped towards her. Though one of its two hands snapped to the pistol, and it all... Though one of its two hands snapped to the pistol that adorned its hip, something entirely unexpected happened. In a friendly, chipper tone, it asked, "Can I help you?" Those words that she had understood, the fact that it was speaking to her like a person and it hadn't spat on her as of yet, meant that there may be a chance. "Help, please, yes." Her common was jarring and broken after all. Why bother teaching a vandal common? It's not like they were able to freely play the stars as most. Oop, that water is fighting back. It's not like they were able to freely ply the stars as most, or intermingle with the myriad of other that inhabited the great void. She knew enough to take orders for her job, and to get swore at by She knew enough to take orders for her job, and to get swore at, but that was about the extent of it. All right, I'll do what I can, but I can't guarantee much. What you need. Sidestra didn't understand about half the words the being spoke. She closed her eyes tight as she repeated what she had practiced. "Help, please, run." Wait, do you want me to run, or do you need help running? Or do you need help running something? I don't think I understand. The being in front of her cocked its head as it looked for clarification. "Help, please, run." Nope, don't like that one. Help, please, run," it repeated. No, because I live in Portugal. And I'm South African, so Brexit hasn't really affected me. I mean, it may affect Europe? I don't know. But that was before I moved to Europe. "Run." The repeated phrase was all that she could think to say, as her mind began treading a dangerous line between hope and fear. A small commotion caught both of their attention. Sidestra's stomach dropped as she saw a group of customs/security officers making their way down the concourse, checking identification cards of those lingering around the ships. The being turned back towards her. The being turned back towards her, raising an eyebrow and flicking a snap on the holster of its sidearm. "Help running, huh?" "No bad, will tell, no lie. Promise." She was beginning to panic. To have gotten this far, only to have waylaid by a communications barrier, was a simple misunderstanding. To have gotten this far, only to be waylaid by a communications barrier, and a simple misunderstanding that her crime was the unfortunate circumstance of simply being born, would be downright calamitous. This statement seemed to relax the being slightly, as its hand moved away from the grip of its sidearm. Can work hard. Her eyes pleading with the being. She needed out, by any means necessary. And so, in an act of desperation, she offered the only thing that she had left, the one thing she had managed to avoid in a life of intermediate servitude. Indentured servitude, not intermediate. The one thing that she had left. The only thing that she had left. The only thing she had left. And so, in an act of desperation, she offered the only thing she had left, the one thing that she'd managed to avoid in a life of indentured servitude. Her gaze cast to the floor. "Can do other," she added softly. The being recoiled a step at her offering. "Jesus Christ, dude, no." It took a deep breath in and narrowed its eyes towards her, its pupils running up and down her under its pupils. Its pupils running up and down her. its pupils running up and down her under her furrowed brow as if to thoroughly analyze every facet of her being. It was searching for something. Its gaze seemed to penetrate her soul. Was it looking for malice? Sedestra held none. Resentment? Well, she certainly had been pleased with the situation. While she certainly hadn't been pleased with her situation, she wasn't letting it weigh her down. Sedestra remained resistant while it executed its silent dissertation. Sedestra remained reticent while it executed its silent dissertation. Sedestra remained reticent while it executed its silent dissection of her soul. Finally, he placed a hand on its forehead, dragging it down over its face. Fuck! Flip's gonna kill me. It let out a long sigh before continuing slowly, carefully. Fine. We'll help. Ellis, it pointed at itself, and then Sedestra with an expectant look. Ellis, it pointed at itself, and then at Sedestra with an expectant look. She wasn't stupid. She knew that Ellis was asking for a name, but that would be risky. The CSOs likely had the file on her, law-abiding or not. Revealing her name could be the difference between a lifetime of what was little. Revealing her real name could be the difference between a lifetime of what was little better than slavery or her liberation into the stars. However, she decided that the relationship that was to last. One that would free her from a life of bondage and servitude, could not be founded on lies and deception. So she doubled down on the strange entity being her savior. Sedestra, she said meekly. I don't know how much you can understand, Alice said, shooting a quick glance over at the CSOs that was slowly approaching before shifting its gaze back to her. But if you want out, you have to make it natural. Don't rush it. You're at the finish line here. Sedestra had no idea what was Sedestra had no idea what was just said to her, so all she could do was give Alice a blank stare. Fortunately for her, this excellent judge of character also seemed to have an innate ability to read emotions. None of that, huh? It took a deep breath, gently, and placing one hand on her shoulder, while using the other to gesture towards the ship. Slow, steady, calm. As much as she wanted to charge the door and hide in whatever small closet she could find to get out of the prying eyes of the denizens of the concourse, Ellis was giving her the same advice that Tem had. It had gotten her this far. A few more slow, deliberate feet couldn't hurt, she hoped. She purposely took carefully measured steps. She purposely took careful measured steps towards the waiting ship, pausing briefly at the lip of a ramp. It was a simple thing, an austere metal strut and a mesh device. But to Sedestra, it might as well have been a golden gilded chariot of the gods. She smiled to herself. She had made it. She was going to be fine. As she took her first step onto the ramp, a voice from behind her called out, Security order! Hold, vandal! Sedestra froze. She had her foot on the path. She had her foot on the path to freedom. She could almost touch the durasteel door that should be her deliverance. She could feel the tears begin to string the sides of her eyes. She wanted to scream. She was so close. Still, she had gotten farther than most, and if nothing else, would have a tale that may inspire others of her race to seek salvation in the company of those more amenable to her lot. Not that the thought brought her much comfort. So she gritted her teeth and turned to face the officer that would likely be the end of her near adventure. And it was now that the most peculiar event unfolded. The same being that had earlier intercepted her. The same being that had earlier intercepted her had now placed itself in the path of the CSO. It used the same upbeat tone while having the same hand on the same pistol, asked the same question. Can I help you? The CSO's mandibles tittered. It clearly didn't like having its minimal amount of authority impeded. However, Ellis remained unfazed, simply making a noise to indicate the anticipation of yet received information. Simply making a noise to indicate the anticipation of a yet received response. If a bug could scowl, it certainly would be at this point. Identification check all foreigners on the concourse. As his vision shifted to Sedestra, he added, with no small amount of venom in his voice, no exceptions. Ellis just gave an affirmative smile. Yeah, no worries. His still chipper tone had seemingly taken on an air of mockery as he held out his ID. The CSO took the card. Cooper, Ellis. Cooper,
Ellis, human, male, class D. When the hell did the science ships get the budget for heavies?
Ellis just shrugged, allowing the CSO to continue.
Security and deckhand, lofty ambitions.
Security and deckhand, lofty ambitions. Well, this seems to check out. What about hers?
Security and deckhand, lofty ambitions. Well, this seems to check out. What about hers?
He asked as he pointed over to Ellis's shoulder, without looking up from the identifier. Ellis gave a half-turn towards Sedestra and blinked at her with one eye. Curious. You want Sedestra's? Well, that might be a bit, problematic.
So she is one of yours?
The CSO asked suspiciously. Yeah, she is. Probably lost her ID in that rat nest she calls a bunk, which is why she's back at the ship, and why getting it might be an issue, Ellis replied.
Well, we had reports of an unidentified on the concourse, and my job is to detain any identity. Well, we had reports of an unidentified on the concourse, and my job is to detain any unidentifieds for interrogation and holding. Her being a vandal adds extra probable cause.
Though his words remained authoritative and unfriendly since checking the human's identifier, his tone had shifted, ever so slightly. She's a vandal. I'll reimburse any damages she's caused. Make sure that she's reprimanded for her actions, and I'll personally guarantee it won't happen again. Ellis did his very best to look apologetic. The CSO's antenna stiffened with indignation.
No, she's a vandal.
Not a vandal, you know? No, I don't. No, I do not.
Vandals, galactic lowlifes, common miscreants.
The CSO paused, seeing the confusion plastered on the human's face.
How do you not know what a vandal is? You're serving with one.
Are you dense? My guy, until 30 seconds ago, you obviously didn't know what a human was. I don't know what you are. Hell, I don't even know what I don't even know what Flip and Merrill are. Galaxy's a big place. I'm just security. I shoot shit that needs to be shot and punch crap that needs to be punched. I keep my head down and don't ask questions.
Who?
The CSO asked. Ellis just tossed a finger at the ship in response. The CSO brought up the ship's registry. Flip, Merrill, a Leuven-bonded pair, proprietors of the lofty ambitions, Class A Xenobiology, Class A Xenobotany, Class A Biology, Class A Xenobiology, Class B Linguistics, Xenobotany. Class A Xenobotany, Class B Linguistics, Class A She's fracking brain cases. Watch it, they're my fracking brain cases. Ellis cut him off, louder than was strictly necessary. A finger pointed menacingly towards the startled CSO. Look, I'll vouch for her, if that means anything, he said as he gestured back towards the young woman. Sedestra can be a bit spacey at times, but she's good folk. If there's a fine or something, I'll be happy to pay it. If you really have to take her in, though. His fingers were now rhythmically tapping the side of his pistol.
The CSO leaned to one side to look past the being that was standing between Sedestra and some serious time in isolation, and was likely considering his options. If this was a runaway vandal, she'd be thrown in solitary, and he'd be rewarded with a good job from his command. If she was a Starship crew member, it would be a lawsuit and a loss of his pension. On top of that, between her and himself stood a high-grav heavy wielder that had seemed to do. Grav heavy wielder. Grav heavy wielder. Between her. On top of that, between her and himself stood a high-grav heavyweight that had seemed to take exception to his existence. With a hand on a pistol. On top of that, between her and himself stood a high-grav heavyweight that had seemed to take exception to his existence, with a hand on a pistol. In the end, the risks outweighed the rewards, so he just shook his head. Nah, it's not worth the paperwork. Just do me a favor. If she finds her ID or not, just keep her on the ship for the rest of your stay, yeah? I don't need vandals running wild at my station. Ditch the bad luck. It's the bad luck. Ellis let out a short chuckle. Yeah, I don't think that'll be a problem at all. The CSO motioned to his squad as they moved away from the ship. Ellis turned to Sedestra and gave a quick nod as he threw up one of his thumbs. She had no idea what the gesture meant, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a faint glimmer of hope. End of story. Cheers, King. Thank you for popping past. Yes, fair enough, Rainbow. Fair enough. Yes, apparently I've forgotten how to drink liquid. Yep. Pump up the volume. No problem with that, Rainbow. Not a problem with that. Gotta get the fun while the fun's there to get. Apparently. Good morning, James. Hope you're doing well. Yeah. Well, I actually do. I used to have that. And sometimes I still drink a bit too quick for the body to reasonably deal with. Alrighty. Uh, 2752. 2752. Yes, I think that's a common thing, Rainbow. I think it's referencing that you're a rainbow and there's a pot of gold at the end. Would be a random guess. Oh no, Phoenix, I do that too. Choke on water or coffee. Seems to be more tragic when you do that with coffee, but yeah. Okay. 2752.1. 2752.1. Depths. I think they seem to be mad in general, Rainbow. Don't think it's specifically you. Fair enough. My mind is not that big. It's a little dog. Well, medium-sized. I was like 10 kilograms. Good morning, Redvex. Ooh. Was it speaking in French? Was it floating in the air, seemingly to disobey the laws of physics? Because those French cats can be quite defensive, especially if you surprise them. There should be a pinned comment linking to the Twitch, Rainbow. It should be at the top of the chat. Ha 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 ha, Redbex. Ha ha. Oh, itchy nose.
Oh. Don't look behind you. Someone's following.
Oh no, somebody's following me. Thank you very much, Ellie, Annie. Annie? Ellie? Very much appreciated. Fair enough. But
Don't look behind you. Someone's following.
oh my god, 2 follows. And a totally 808. Thank you for the follow. Very much appreciated. So I try to keep saying the account name, because remembering all the accounts that are doubled between the 2 things gets a bit much. Okay. What are we doing? We're doing stuff. Cool. Next story. Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to the latest narration of the web series. Nope, that's the wrong one. Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Depths, written by Possible Letters 42. I still remember the first time I saw a human weep. I know that nobody there, when it happened, will ever forget. Humanity had appeared on the galactic stage only a few years before. A reclusive. Humanity had appeared on the galactic stage only a few years before. A reclusive species, but friendly. They had made initial trade overtures, but firmly refused permission for any trade routes to extend inside of human space proper. Human couriers always stood over shipments at one end. Couriers. Human couriers always took over shipments at one of the many bustling stations ringing human space. It had a cost, but the voracious consumer appetites of humanity meant that the galactic commerce had just jumped. But the voracious consumer appetites of humanity meant the galactic commerce had adjusted without much fuss. They were a curious sort, in many ways. Mostly, they were odd to most galactic denizens in how their perception was wired much differently than the galactic norm. Most species in the galaxy had not evolved with written language and spoken word as the primary forms of communication, but rather complex exchanges of pheromones. Even species with no knowledge of one another could receive a detailed emotional readout from basic bodily secretions. So widespread was the biological norm. Humans had informed us that some species on their elusive homeworld, as far as I knew, never seen by any species, used this method to various extents, and they themselves had a limited capacity for pheromone generation. However, to our refined sensibilities, most human pheromones were clunky, unsophisticated things, a shout more than a word. Most species of the galaxy could have entire conversations as nuanced and delicate as any, absolutely wordlessly in their pheromones, whereas human pheromones boiled down to hunger, sex, anger, illness. It was somewhat like trying to have a conversation with a child. For this reason, communications in those early days were strained. Our linguistics were as primitive as their pheromones. We talked past each other often. Consequently, we thought them friendly but simple creatures, if no real depth. Simple creatures. Of no real depth. With their soft skin and large eyes, also no real threat. Human space remained unviolated because nobody had cared enough to try. But few believed the rigid rules of humanity would fare well against the But few believed the rigid rules of humanity would fare well against any real test. Toothless merchants with clumsy pheromones. This was their reputation. Truly, no individual is so foolish as a group of them can manage to be. One inevitable result of human inability to perceive pheromone communication was that they were considered relatively unsophisticated political players. They spoke honestly and earnestly and seemed unaware of plots, gossip, and hidden meanings right under their noses. Their naivete was disarming and of no small charm, which served them in good stead diplomatically. Still, the politically savvy species of the galaxy knew that it was only a matter of time until the more aggressive species took advantage, and the Moktid did exactly that. The premier warrior race in the galaxy, the Moktid, were biologically quite similar. The premier warrior race of the galaxy, the Moktid, were biologically quite familiar to the humans, who opined that they appeared similar to some hybrid between the larger versions of the standard bipedal form, along with a creature called a fox, and another called a wolf from their home world. Brave, clever, and honor-focused, the Moktid were unfortunately still far more driven by the predatory drive of their primitive nature than humanity. The blunt and honest nature of humanity had earned positive initial inroads with the Moktid. However, human trade eclipsed Good night, King. Hope you have a fantastic day. With the However, human trade eclipsed many Moktid merchants in gendering. Okay. However, human trade eclipsed many Moktid merchants, engendering resentment. Eventually, popular Moktid opinion, heavily inflamed by pundits and politicians, came to hold the humans as not only soft and unthreatening, but also to see these upstart primates as dishonorable or mischievous due to their secretive nature. Success over Moktid's merchants and refusal to allow incursions into human space. The increasingly vitriolic rhetoric reached an inevitable result. Following nearly a year of fruitless negotiations, the Moktid Armada Primus cruised into Earth space on an invasion heading. The less warlike species battened down the hatches and stayed out of the way. None could directly challenge the Moktid, and there was no political will to come to the defense of a species as new and secretive as humans. The invasion wasn't over quickly. It was over instantly. Within a day, the shattered remnants of the Armada Primus, reduced by approximately 87%, returned to Quixeland Station, the home of the Nebula Congress and all species embassies. On the floor of Congress, the Moktid Senator Klimbar delivered the fleet's report in a mixture of pheromonic painting and halting, emotional spoken language, a message delivered in equal parts rage and terror, telling the horrified Congress of weapons that bent the fabric of reality, as well as dishonorable and incredibly brutal combat techniques that sought to take no prisoners. In desperation, the Moktid invoked the right of challenge, one of the most ancient traditions of the Congress. We all expected the humans to brush it off, We all would. We all. We all would have. It wasn't mandatory. The right of challenge was a tool meant to prevent war through the combat of two designated representatives. It had never been invoked after a war. There was no incentive for a victorious species to limit their spoils and conquest after any beware. There was no incentive for victorious species to limit their spoils and conquest after they had already won. To the shock of all, Senator Ito, a female human senator, quietly accepted on a condition. Klimbar was too stunned for a moment to respond. Ito and Klimbar had been two politicians most heavily involved in negotiations to avoid the war. Neither had wanted it. Both had understood the role of pundits in politics in the unnecessary heat between species. And in their negotiations, they too had become rather public friends over the past year. Something that had caused a great deal of anger amongst both of their peoples as rhetoric ratcheted up in fervor. But neither seemed to care much about that. Klimbar had assumed the much more physically imposing male human. Klimbar to care much. Klimbar had assumed that the much more physically imposing male human senator, Hotchkiss, much about that. Klimbar had assumed that the much more physically imposing male human senator, Hotchkiss, would accept the challenge if either bothered doing so at all. Ita, diminutive and unassuming, had not crossed her mind. She had to ask Ita to repeat her condition. If humanity prevails in this challenge, do you agree to restore our honor in the eyes of the Moktid and to agree to a peaceful existence? Klimbar stared. The Moktid female was the most formidable gender of the species, and a juggernaut compared to a human. Nearly 10 feet tall, with coarse, thick fur, viciously curving fangs, and 4 razor-sharp talons per forelimb. A Moktid was a fair challenge for a modestly sized bear, let alone an unarmored human. Should you prevail, human honor will be unquestionable, her voice dipped sadly, but you will not. Ito's pheromones, as blunt and unsteady. Ito's pheromones, as blunt and Ito's pheromones, as blunt and unstable as all human pheromones, displayed hints of sad and angry. But all present noted one missing entirely. Fear. The two met at midday, 2 days from the challenge, per tradition. The Moktid clad only in her fur, the human wearing a light flowing garment and carrying only a slightly curved blade, removed slowly from an ornate wooden sheath. Klimbar roared in challenge. Ito gave a deep bow in silence, holding it for several moments. A single tear fell from her eye. The battle was not important. We all have seen humans fight since that day. The tear is what mattered. Even as Ito raced towards Klimbar with remarkable speed, even as her impossibly keen blade whistled in the air, the species of the Congress reeled from the sole tear that had fallen as the battle began. By the end, which came quickly, while Klimbar lay slain and Ito knelt weeping, the entire Congress was immobile, racked with new and terrible feelings beyond belief. Of all the crude, basic human feelings we had become accustomed to, Of all the crude, basic human feelings we had become accustomed to, we had never sensed true human grief. It sundered us all, a depth of conflicting emotion and synesthesia, so powerful, the most stoic of our number wept in empathy. No idea, King. YouTube does what YouTube does. I have no control over it. If I did, I would have a much, much... Well, actually, my life would probably still be the same. The most stoic of our number. Because that shit's not going to happen. But I have a non-storing dog. Hello. Into you, dog. Wept in... So powerful. So powerful, the most stoic of our number wept in empathy. The grief contained in Ito's bright golden admiration for Klimbla's courage, the silver sheen on her fierce devotion to her species, the bedrock marble white of her unshakable sense of duty, the scarlet rage at the unfairness of the situation, and the crushing black void that was the loss of a true friend. Ito left the station and never returned to her post. She lives alone in a small abode in a place called Kamincha. My agenda, I read stories for people. That's all my agenda. No agenda. I tell stories. Good morning, Dave. Hope you're doing well. Ito left the station. And never returned to her post. She lives alone in a small abode in a place called Kamajima. She is considered a great hero of both Maktid. She is considered a great hero of both Maktid and humanity for averting a war and establishing human honor beyond doubt. By all reports, she despises this reputation bitterly and will not tolerate mention of it in her presence. Humanity opened its borders the next day. The same day the Maktid delivered a deep apology for the hubris and requested a formal peace and trade alliance. There was no need for secrecy anymore, no need for borders. We had seen what they were trying to keep hidden. A terrifyingly effortless capacity for killing, an unfathomable depth of feeling, two incredible gifts combined to form the most bittersweet curse. All species fear and respect humanity. None envy them. End of story. Up-doot-de-doot. Good morning, R-Up. Hope you're doing well. Not trying to make anybody believe anything. I tell stories. That's it. Science stories. You either like them or you don't. That's pretty much it. You let's turn the volume up a little bit. First, I have some coffee. Oh yes, coffee. I think the human advantage there was multiple things, but the sword was probably one. Heavy gravity was probably another. And violence. I can't spell for shit. I've single-handedly developed, helped Microsoft develop autocorrect. Sometimes I even confuse Google with how bad my spelling is. Not sometimes, a lot. Let me try something. Just a random thing. I mean, I'm not saying anything. I'm just typing. Ha 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 ha, Red Vex. Ha ha. Ookie kookie. On to the second story, because it's a short one. 275. That's not good, James. Not good at all. 2752-2. Humanity. Humanity had a single. That must have weighed tons. Just a... $8 million dimes. We can work this out. How much does a dime weigh? Does a dime weigh? Is 2.2 grams. Okay. Hmm. 2.2. Hello? 2.2 times 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 equals divided by 1,000 equals a lot of fucking weight. Okay. Somebody running away with a big sack full of money is like $10. But people will do what people do. Okay, let's move on to the next story. Volume down. Nope. Story number 2. Humanity had a single planet, written by Shadow of a Person. Ambassador Krell sneered at the humans. The decision had been made already, though they would not know of it for a few cycles yet. They were a puny species, one with no ambition. They sat on the lowest rung of the council, a single planet to their name. Even the Drellians, Lycan farmers, had 3. Pathetic. The humans rarely spoke. When they did, it was of trains. The Scorer didn't have such a term. They translated it as primitive mass transit systems. Their fleets rose the singularity tunnels rose. Their fleets rode the singularity tunnels between systems on carriers the size of islands. What threat could be posed by a species that still laid track? Such lack of ambition had to be rewarded. The scorer had to expand. The solution was simple. When the war drum sounded, Krell volunteered to lead the cleansing. The Grand Scorer Warfleet fell through the human orbital warp gate. Sensor readouts blared out their reports. It seemed the humans had been foolish enough to report their military capabilities to the Council accurately, paltry as they were. 0 carriers, 6 frigates, and a smattering of orbital platforms. No life signs. Atmospheric readings, Krell barked. Earth's empty, hissed the tactical officer. No sapient biosignatures. They disappeared as we entered the system. Krell's claws flexed. A trick. Had to be. His hollow display lit with the fleet's battle count. 74 His hollow... Had to be. His hollow display lit with the fleet's battle count. 74 carriers, 1,776 frigates, 88 million fighter drones. Against this... Burn! No. Burn there! The orbital gate exploded. A single shot from a railgun battery on Luna punched through it. Insane, Krell thought. Gates were sacred. More than that, they were expensive. It cost the Scorer nearly a year of industrial output to build one. It was unthinkable to destroy your own. The humans had reported possessing 74 gates in the Earth system, most terrestrial, an obvious lie. The Scorer had concluded, but perhaps. No matter. Krell's laugh rattled around the bridge. No reinforcements for them either. Proceed. Fragment 1, Supply Chain Engineer Journal, Battle Hour 1. Handwritten, smudged graphite. Evacuation of Earth's populace complete in 20 minutes. Room for improvement, 5 minutes. Redirecting all train flows. Total override. The operation should be profitable. They think it's a war. Ha! The salvage will be great. P.S. Get on Xerxes Sector's ass. Their signaling system issues are reducing drone throughput by 12%. If this was a serious fight, that could matter. Fragment 2, Scorer Tactical AI Output, Battle Hour 3. Data burst translated. Enemy population 0 confirmed. Enemy industry 2, terrestrial facilities. Enemy assets error. Recommendations update axioms. Query. Define industry when construction occurs in transit. Define ship when drones outmass carriers by 3 orders of magnitude. Define war when opponent... Define war when opponent prioritizes scrap collection over survival. Earth boiled into a cloud of steel. Human gates were on the surface, under mountains, near rivers, on rocks that circled electric orbits around the sun. The Council mandated reports of carriers, of frigates. Fighter drones were useless without them. By definition, they would not travel that interplanetary distances required of any other war. For any other war. The Scorer Tactical AI revised its count every second. 10,000, 100,000, a million, a trillion. They boiled up from trains, traveling on long loops between gates, not even slowing down to release their cargo into the atmosphere. Then into Scorer Fleet, disappearing back into the void to restock. Impossible, the tactical officer hissed. Our one planet's industry can't possibly support this. Krell watched a carrier die. Drones throwing themselves at point defense cannons until they ran out of bullets, throwing themselves at shields until they ran out of charge, throwing themselves at armor. Plasma cutters carefully dissecting a living ship. Scorer troops systematically vented to the void. They're recycling, he realized. Drones crippled by point defense joined the... systematically. They're recycling, he realized. Drones crippled by point defense joined vast plates of Scorer battle armor, caught by tug drones and hauled back to Luna, loaded into train cars that had just disgorged a fresh wave of drones. Destroy the tracks, Krull ordered. Drones repaired those faster than they could. Fragment 3, avoid child's nursery rhyme. Recovered from unsalvageable wreckage of Carrier X7. Sing-song cadence, human accented galactic common. Tick, tick, tick goes the track layer. Between the stars where the coal gates shop. Tick, tick. Tick, tick, tick goes the track layer. Between the stars where the coal gets sharper. Spin a thread, scratch your sun. More's not fun till the scrapping's done. Whispered addendum. Mama says the darkness not empty. Just forgot to bring the light. Papa says we'll stitch it pretty. Rail by rail, by rail by rail. Good morning, Muskup. Hope you're doing well. Krull's flagship, like the rest of his fleet, died slowly, let dry by a storm of kinetics. Magazines ran dry by a seemingly endless supply of drones. Alerts blaring hull breach with no regard for battle tactics. The ship simply being disassembled from the freer forwards. They broadcast surrender codes on all available frequencies. No response. The humans weren't crew, they were thorough. Krill understood in the end, long after it mattered, this wasn't a war at all. This was a salvage operation. Fragment 4, Human Engineering Post-Combat Report. Subject score of fleet SK-77 salvage efficiency. Total mass recovered 98.2%, excluding biologicals. Notable gains, 74 singularity cores, repurposed as void locomotive engines. 1,776 frigate hulls, melted into rail ties. See Andromeda. See Andromeda spur-faced 2. 88 million drone batteries, powering daycare simulators. See Codex 8835-AC. Recommendation, next invasion fleet should use more tungsten. Current stockpiles suboptimal for transgalactic bridge joints. Direct emergency to matter fabrication inefficient. Direct energy to matter fabrication inefficient. 3 years later, a Galactic Union scout stumbled on a structure in the dark between stars. Not a planet, not a star, a lattice of graphene and iron spinning slowly in the abyss. Sensors identified it as a rail hub, its tracks stretching into the voids between galaxies. The captain, a scorer, ordered an immediate retreat. Too late. A wave of drones emerged, happy for fresh construction material. Not fighters, blunt, faceless things, builders. The scout was dismantled systematically, engines first. The last transmission showed a human boarding the bridge, wearing a faded Earth flag. Relax, a voice cracked through the man-made scorer comms. We're just laying track. The council convened on an emergency session. Ambassador Louvet of the human delegation took her place at the lowest tier, adjusted a scarf. The chamber's acoustic carried her side to every podium. The chamber's acoustics carried her side to every podium. You misunderstood. We don't want your council seats. She pulled up a holographic map. One planet, 1,000 threads extending into the cosmic void between galaxies. 456 self-sustaining ring habitats. 325 O'Neill cylinders, 3 Dyson spheres, built around rogue stars. We don't care for your territory. You counted planets, we counted the space between them. You counted planets, we counted the spaces in between. You know how much fits in that silence. She smiled, fingers tapping a tablet. Hint, it's a power of 10 game. You lose. A child's voice chirped from the rail map, bearing the crushing weight of banality. Now departing at 13:24 service from Andromeda Central Station to Vertigo Stellar Forge. Expected arrival 12:02. Yeah, 14:02. Lee smiled. You keep the warm worlds. Lee smiled. You keep the warm worlds. You rule the galaxy. We'll take the quiet places. The void between. End of story. Yeah. Gives me very much a Factorio vibe. The factory must grow. Alrighty, I'm gonna be back in in a moment. I will be back. I give you music and chair. Alright, back. Bacon. The title had me hooked from the beginning. 2753. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Bacon, written by Few Zookeepers Game 105. Written by Few Zookeeper Game 105. It's done. What? She's tapped into the emergency generator, Captain. Why? What in the Emperor's name is it doing now? I think perhaps you should ask her yourself. I wasn't quite sure. Captain Crusher shot her first mate a look and raised her dorsal spikes in an irritation, pushing past him and stalked through the corridors of his ship. The human, currently living below engineering in what, for some reason, it insisted on calling the poop deck, was constantly doing things. It vexed Crusher that the mammal laughed every time she said poop deck, too. Disrespectful. First Mate Earth swiped her First Mate Earth swiped his claws over the door control and allowed the captain to enter first. She was ready to deliver a stern admonishment when they both paused, nostrils flared. Earth, what is that smell? The first mate's tongue flicked, tasting the air. It smells like flesh, blackened. I smell charcoal, hot metal. Agreed. A fire. He shook his feathered head, light gleaming iridescently over his scales. If it is small and controlled. Crusher rubbed his shallow chin with a slender claw. Be ready to douse the area if we find an uncontrolled conflagration. Earth blinked his acknowledgement, and they moved forward. The human soon came into sight, squatting on its oddly hinged knees, poking a small brazier, apparently fashioned from discarded parts from the engineering deck above them. She looked up from the cooking device and waved the spatula in a friendly greeting. Greeting. Watcher, Captain, how's it going? Watcher, Captain, how's it hanging? The two Lacertains glanced at each other, and Crusher flicked her tongue warily. What are you doing, hairless mammal? The human made an odd expression, and its eyes rolled backwards at its skull. I told you it's Sam, she stood, springy legs jolting her up suddenly. Still made Crusher queasy, watching how those tiny backwards limbs propelled her graciously around. The captain asked you what you were doing, human. Sam looked at Earth, a clearly sardonic grin on her face. Why, I'm having a little cook-off. I'd rather be under the stars, but, you know, she puffed her cheeks out, clutching meaty digits in her fleshy neck, and made noises miming asphyxiation. Crusher's tongue shot out, a lightly mocking chuckle. Is the food module not to your liking? I did not realize your kind was so particular about your foodstuffs. Earth grunted. I've seen them eat fruit. Crusher felt her stomach flip again as Sam said, Fruits are good for you. It keeps you nice and regular. She turned to the captain. The module's fine. Does what you want, even if it does usually taste like melted plastics. Thing is, when we stopped on the asteroid the other day, I found a little farmer's market, rare out here. Earth leant in, whispered into Crusher's external whispered into Crusher's external tympanic membrane, purveyors of exotic food and wares. That's right, Sam was beaming at them, the post-ape reflex that was supposed to radiate a non-threatening demeanor. It merely made Crusher hungry. Anyway, Sam continued, at the market I found something I've not had for, maybe 2 years. Cost me a bloody fortune, but she curled the digits on her paw in a complicated gesture that Crusher didn't recognize, and pressed it to her lips. Mwah! Absolutely worth it. Crusher tasted the air again. It did smell good. What beast flesh is this, human? Sam, said Sam. You've never smelled this before? Sam turned back to the Sam turned back to the Sam turned back to the lightly smoking grill as Krisha replied, "I've smelled similar, but Ayoth's olfactory senses were superior to hers, being of the tracking lineage cut in. High levels of salt and animal bread merely for consumption, very fatty, zero complex carbohydrates. A carnivore's meal, indeed." Sam made a slightly indignant noise in her throat. "We're omnivores, remember? I eat just as much meat as you." She paused, then tilted her head to one side. Then tilted her head to one side on her tooth and neck. "Maybe not as much as you guys, but you know what I mean." Ayoth suddenly looked worried. Using the delicate body and visual language of their species, he said, "It smells close to human flesh." Krisha couldn't contain her surprise. All four of her lids drew back, exposing her eyes to the harsh light the human had hung from the ceiling. As her pupils attempted to adjust her carnivore vision to the mammal's daylight, As her pupils attempted to adjust her carnivore vision to the mammal's daylight, she hissed, "Surely not. Humanity appears to be at least likely to consume their own." Ayoth flicked his tongue nervously. Krisha turned back to Sam, who was once again on her haunches, prodding at the sizzling slices of pink flesh. "What creature is this human? If I find you to be cannibalistic, I'll be forced to jettison you from the cargo bay immediately." Sam looked up at them, mouth wide O with Sam looked up at them, mouth wide of O. Sam looked up at them, mouth a wide O of absolute horror. She sat there silently mouthing for some time, face turning her cooking. She sat there silently mouthing for some time, face turning to her cooking, and then back to them, disbelieving. Finally, she spoke up. "You think I'm a cannibal? You realize there are a few worse taboos for us, right?" "Of course. Hence my eagerness to freeze you in the blackness of space if you are. You humans are a violent and bloodthirsty species at the best of times. We remember the war you fought against us and our empire." Sam stood now, barely up to the Lactarian's shoulders, but still a terrible vision of bright red fur above her fleshy face and intense green eyes. "Don't give me that crap. You started it, though." "Don't give me that crap. You started it. Thought there would be the usual mammalian pushovers that you got in your world." She took a deep breath, calming herself. It did nothing to ease Krisha and Ayoth. It did nothing. She took a deep breath, calming herself. It did nothing to ease Krisha and Ayoth, however. He turned to the captain, hissed, "Perhaps it is a creature genetically similar to a species." They waited until Sam smiled at them disarmingly. "Look, I realize that had the potential to go badly wrong. Why don't we start over? I appreciate you giving me passage across the sector. I'm not a cannibal, and I'm not dangerous. I wasn't even alive when the war ended. We don't live that long here. We don't live that long here." Sam stopped, sparing 2 pieces of now slightly browned meat with a skewer. Krisha tasted the air around it, listening as it crackled and hissed in the air. She looked at Ayoth, saw that he was doing the same. It did smell good. Very good. "You promise this is not some butchered human. I would gladly eat such, but not accept it from another of its kind." "Yes," Sam snapped. "I promise. Eat it. Now." They took a piece of meat each, thick scaled claws unaffected by the still scalding temperature. Krisha hesitated before she ate, glancing once again at Ayoth. He was watching her, mouth open, saliva pooling around his lower fangs, waiting for her, waiting to follow her lead. She took a deep breath and popped the meat into her mouth. Krisha let out, Krisha let it sit there, doing nothing. She chewed a little, then a lot. Finally, she swallowed. "That was—" Ayoth had swallowed his morsel. "Please, human, say there is more of that meat." "It's Sam." Krisha cut in. "Sam," she said with a sibilant hiss, "tell us there is more." Sam grinned again. "That's better. Sure there's more. I bought about 60 rashers back." Brought, not bought. "That's better. That's better. Sure, there's more. I brought about 60 rashes back. What beast is this? I've never tasted anything like it. Sam looked slightly perplexed. Hairy ridges above her eyes crossing slightly. Really? Well, on Earth we've got loads of them. Used to kill about 120 a year. Earth made a dismissive noise in his throat. That's not many. Million. 120 million. His dorsal spines raised in shock. That is a staggering amount for a mammalian species. Sam shrugged. Krisha pressed on, feeding her saliva ducts filling at the smell coming from Sam's grill. What animal is this? A pig. These rashes come from pigs. What are they named? What cut is it? Sam shrugged again. I don't know, but they're called bacon. The rashes, I mean. You... Sam shrugged again. I don't know, but they're called bacon. The rashes, I mean. Hey, you want some? You could teach... You want some? Could teach your food modules the thing to reproduce. Hey, you want some? Could teach your food module thing to reproduce it. Won't be the same, mind. Something to do with the pigs needing to be outside instead of, never existing at all. And the flesh being made of messing around with the molecules and that. She turned and rummaged through a small box, which emitted a vapor as cold as air itself, met with the warm air of the ship. Here. Sam held out 2 plastic wraps, each containing, according to the label, 20 rashers of purebred, genetically modified, reduced salt, organic, free-range bacon. Okay, that is a sentence. The captain was amazed. You show such kindness, why? Why grant us this gift, and allow us to recreate it in our modules? The diplomacy of the war, the deals and bargains made, could have been avoided if only the humans had shared this amazing food before now. Well, Sam said, me mum, when I was a kid, would make us bacon sandwiches. Don't ask, as Aoth opened his mouth to question, and especially when something bad happened. Bacon, she said, eating a slightly burned rasher for obvious pleasure. Bacon, she said, eating a slightly burned rasher with obvious pleasure, soothes the soul. It is surely the king. It is surely the meat of kings. Sam chewed thoughtfully. Actually, it's real bad for you. Real bad. Causes cancer. Bad for your heart. That sort of thing, but... Aoth interrupted. But it's worth it. Yeah. Sam raised a hand subtly, palm out, making them flinch. That was supposed to be a high five, but yeah, bacon is worth it. Spread the message. Try not to start a religion. She chuckled and turned back to her grill, humming a nothing tune. Krisha looked at Aoth, who was giving her the same thoughtful expression. Up till now, they'd praised the Emperor. Up to now, they'd praised the Emperor, and only the Emperor. The Empire was grand, and all knew it. And yet, bacon. End of story. Up doot-de-doot. Yeah, very much cheese incident. Process. Yeah. 2753. 27523. 23. 3. 3-2. Story number 2. A Declaration of Peace, written by Arlene and Nala. By Arlene and Nala. A Declaration of Peace, written by Arlene and Nala. A Declaration of Peace, written by Arlene and Nala. And Nalra. A Declaration of Peace, written by Arlene and Nalra. No, because pretending is my job.
I am the king of pretending. You shall never take my crown, bot. Be gone, bot. Be gone.
What am I looking at? Asked Blag. His species didn't have eyes in the most traditional sense. Instead, an inch-wide band of photosensitive and highly chromatic cells encircled the near spherical head. It was one of the most beautiful things that Cole had ever seen. It didn't make it hard for anyone to just tell where the Blurkin's tension was. But it made one of the most beautiful things that Cole had ever seen. But it didn't make it hard for anyone to tell just where the Blurkin's attention was. The document is a declaration of peace, said Cole, brushing an imaginary speck of dust off his sleeve. This was the third time he'd had to explain the document, the third time that he'd been passed to the next higher echelon of Blurkin governmental hierarchy, and hopefully the last.
Be it affirmed, the Council of Blue and the Human Consortium are at peace. I do not understand, said Blog. A declaration of peace. We're not at war, are we?
No war has been declared, said Cole. At least none between the Council and the Consortium.
Then what is the purpose of declaring peace?
Asked Blag. The Blurkin's lower body looked more like a collection of multicolored basketballs and jump ropes tossed into a mesh bag than anything else. Cole was familiar enough with the species that he could read some of the stronger Blurkin emotions by those colors. Blog's bright reds and smatterings of neon green clearly showed his confusion. A slightly thicker green jump rope-like appendage thrust savagely at the document.
This would seem to be a waste of mine and the rest of the Council of Blue's time.
I assure you, Councillor, it is not a waste of time. We, the Human Consortium, are simply clarifying our position, said Cole, adding just a hint of steel to his tone. Blog examined the man, taking note of his stance and hardened eye. He wasn't a very imposing man, much less so next to the utter behemoth of Blurkin. But the life of a diplomat left him in a very little time to maintain old soldier body, and there was enough grey in his temples to indicate the human was well past his physical prime. He wasn't soft by any means, just not quite as solid as he used to be. Cole smiled with a wry grin. Come now, Councillor, do you honestly not know what this is about? He asked. The Kufla colony, world in Sector 17-11 by your reckoning.
17-11, said Blog quietly. Nothing about that sector comes to mind, no.
Really? Then you don't know anything about the Kleck hive ship taking up orbit around the fourth planet in that system? The color of Blag's body shifted, settling into deeper blues and violets. Cole recognized the change as growing unease. Blogg knew about the ship. There was no doubt in Cole's mind now. Of course, the Blogg would never admit that he knew about the ship. That would be admitting that the Council, and hence the Bluekin as a species, had sanctioned the hive ship's actions. Honestly, I don't think the Coalflers would have minded the company if the ship hadn't... Honestly, I don't think the Kooflers would have minded the company if the ship had kept to itself. But you see, that hive ship started dropping spore pods on the far side of the continent, and that upset the Kooflers something fierce, said Cole, paying studious attention to the fingernails of his left hand. They're cute little guys about 4 feet tall. Make them mad, though, and you're in a world of hurt. So we thought that we'd be prudent. So... Oh, make them mad, though. World of hurt. So we thought it prudent to make this declaration a declaration of peace. What? Why? Asked Blagg. This has nothing to do with the consortium or the council. How much of our history do you know, Councillor? Not that much, I'd gather. So I'll enlighten you on a few of the finer points, said Cole. In the old days, there were two great powers on our planet. You had the USSR and its cadre of vassal countries, and you had the good old US of A, and the rest of the so-called Western world. There are other nations out there, but they don't really matter for the point I'm trying to make. So we'll ignore them just now. Now the USSR had the USA. Now the USSR and the USA were big dogs on the planet. Kind of like the Council of Blue and the Human Consortium are now, stated Cole. Do you have a point in this? Interrupted Blagg. I'm getting there, assured Cole. You see, both the USA and the USSR had enough nuclear weapons stockpiled to wipe out all life on planet Earth, thousands of times over. Back then, all we had was planet Earth. We didn't have interplanetary, much less interstellar travel. So no one dared ruffle anyone's feathers. Oh, there are dust-ups now and then. Some country in one sphere picking a fight with a lesser player on the other side. But that was where it stopped. The big boys were always involved, of course, but never out in the open. Always from the shadows. They used those conflicts as a way to feel each other out without starting a shooting war. Are you implying that the Council is responsible for hive ships? Asked Blagg. His colours burst into bright oranges and yellows as his anger crested. You know very well that the Clerk are an independent species. Don't make me spell it out for you, snapped Cole. We know the game better than you do, and we're not sharing a single ball of mud. The Human Consortium and the Council of Blue are two large powers in their own universe. We're at peace, and we will enforce that peace. Enforce it? Yelled Blagg. The Human Consortium can do no more. What is it, Blagg? I'm in the middle of... A much younger, smaller Bluekin had rolled up to Blagg and leaned its head in close. The newcomer was only a third the size of Blagg, with many fewer spheres making up its body. As it spoke, Blagg's colours seemed to pale until he was almost pure white. They wouldn't. You can't be serious, he gasped out. Deadly. The Human Consortium and Council of Blue are at peace. We have declared it to be so. We expect to remain at peace and will take steps, whatever steps prove necessary, to remain at peace. But molecular degenerators, they are indiscriminate. They can shoot everything, screeched Blagg. And what do Clerk hive ship spores do? Countered Cole. But on the Clerk homeworld, Blagg, you have to remember that Clerk is an independent species, said Cole. The Human Consortium and the Council of Blue have not entered into a conflict here. We are at peace. All we've done is removed a threat to the peace. But the Clerk were our... I would suggest that you tell what is left of the Clerk to avoid our space and our friends' space from now on, said Cole, shaking his head as he turned to leave. The Human Consortium does not go to war, Councillor. We do not pick fights, as our ancestors did. We only finish them. End of story. An interesting one. No. Type 1 in the chat if you're a bot. Type 2 in the chat if you're not. Type 3 in the chat if you're confused. A bunch of people rolled in. Good day. Welcome, welcome. Hope you're all doing well. Yes, always carry a molecular disintegrator. You never know when you'll need it. Two seven five four -1. Yes, binary rounding error. Funny stuff. Terrans unbowed. Terrans unbound. Oh yeah. Those floating points float all over the place. Sometimes they're here, sometimes they're there. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest narration in the web series. I just love the fact that the idea of there's a bot that's used to normal chat, and it's just trying to get a bead on what's going on in our stream, which is completely different to any other stream, and it's just going, "Ah." Good morning, Kirsten. Hope you're doing well. Yes. The spreadsheet laugh. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Terrans Unbowed, written by Tonberry Fay. An hour before sunrise in Ulcar 3, General Zur of the Polcatic. General Zur of the Polcatic Dominion awoke to the sound of klaxons. There was no drill. He'd have been informed if there was one. He threw on his pants and jacket and ran to his state terminal, punching access codes for the base command center. Report! An anxious lieutenant answered. Unidentified vessel just appeared at the system's jump point, sir. She emerged with shields up and engines at full burn. We think she's Terran, sir. The words sent icy shivers down Zur's spines. Terror, the Dominion's greatest mistake. What ships hold the point? A light cruiser Kretinak. She reports taking fire. Show me. Data flowed across his screens. Sensor sweeps, vid feeds, logs of active chatter. A cargo hauler was blaring an SOS after finding itself between a Terran battleship and its prey. casually blown apart by an opening salvo that had spared the Krendak for a time. Yet even as Zer studied the reports, he saw the battle for a lopsided brawl it was. The Terrans, driving straight for Alcar 3, cared only to cripple the cruiser such that it could not pursue, a feat they achieved with a spread of torpedoes. Almost contemptuously. Almost contemptuously, they loosed a flight of ramships loaded with Terran Marines to finish the job while the battleship pursued its main prey. "Get me Admiral Klev." The screen went dark for a moment before shifting to a battle bridge of an orbiting warship. The grey, oval features of Admiral Klev filled the screen. "Admiral, has there been any messages from the incoming vessel?" Cold as the grave, the Admiral answered, "Yes, General. They broadcasted a single message on arrival. For Terra." "Can you stop them, Admiral?" The old officer shook his head. "I do not know, but we will try." The Admiral Klev vanished, leaving only Zer's dark reflection on the screen. Terra had just been another planet, mankind just another species, a conquest like any other. The Dominion had spread through the galaxy in this fashion, conquering, subjugating, enlightening. Zer believed in the Dominion. He was born into it, raised by it. He fought for it all his life. Now, because his ancestors had conquered the wrong world, he would likely die for it. The Terrans had been no match for their forces, having only a few outlying colonies, and little in the way of a fleet. Full conquest of mankind had taken only a year, at least on paper. In practice, they had never been conquered. Some had, it was true. Some bent the knee and pledged their lives to the new masters, but many, too many, denied the manifest destiny of the Dominion. They protested then. Give me 1 second. Alrighty. The bot has been botted. Unusual. It's the first one we've had on YouTube. They protested then. They protested. They rioted. They attacked officials and government buildings. They fought guerrilla campaigns across their planets, and no one more fiercely than Terra itself. After 30 years of unrest, it decided an example had to be made, and Terra burned. Against any other foe, that would have been the end of it. The Hareen had resisted once, but the death of their homeworld broke their resolve. Now Hareen warriors manned the fighter craft, scrambling to intercept the approaching battleship. The Venol had been fanatical enemies of the Dominion until Cogni soldiers undermined their religion and subverted them into shock troopers. Now they stood ready to counter the inevitable boarding parties the Terrans would throw at them. But the Terrans, nothing broke them, not even the death of their world. They simply fled into the darkness, where they lurked to this day. All anyone ever saw of them were raids like this, where a Terran warship or fleet of warships emerged from the darkness to rain fire and death upon the Dominion. No calls for surrender were made or acknowledged. No communications were made at all, bar their opening statement, "For Terra." Not even made as battle cry, or a mournful lamentation, or even spit of rage. It was a blunt statement of fact. Ground forces were arrayed for all the good it would do. As many could be brought into orbit were sent. As, ma- as many as could be brought into orbit. As many as could be brought to orbit were sent. Found stations on ships and rushed forwards in the hope that they might board the Terran battleship and take control. The jump point was 4 days out from Alcar 3 at full burn, and that's all the Terran ship knew how to do. They cared nothing for secondary targets beyond what could be flung at them on the way past. They took no defensive actions and evaded little. These ram raids were running fleet battles against an assault ship built for the sole purpose of killing worlds. By the end of the first day, Zer had a mountain of grim reports to study. The Krentenak was dead. The Terrans took control of her fire control systems and began hurling ordnance at everything in range, and detonated the reactors when they ran out of targets. 2 other cruisers met similar fates. Boarding parties hit them as their mothership raced past. The Terrans then made straight for critical systems and sabotaged them to lethal effect. The Terrans knew there was a suicide. The Terrans knew theirs was a suicide mission, and it mattered not one bit. Admiral Cleve tried. By God, he tried. The Terran shields were hammered down time and again, and each time they fell, a bloody toll was taken from her hull. Turrets and engine mounts were shorn off, sensors blinded, gaping wounds ripped through the hull that sent dozens of crew tumbling out into the void. She has hounded and wounded. She was hounded and wounded for days, yet on she came, straight for the world. In the final hour of the fighting, the Admiral's flagship bravely put itself directly in the path of the incoming Terrans. Cleve died at his station, hoping his sacrifice would save the world. It did not. Zer stood upon the base's muster field and watched the sky. Every ship and shuttle available had been loaded with as many people as capacity allowed, and made for space to flee the coming cataclysm. Above, debris fell like meteors. Dead ships, broken orbitals, all killed by the unceasing barrage of firepower hurled by an advancing battleship. A ship on a collision course. A ship on a collision course with the planet, and still accelerating. The ship was dead by now, a bug-faced tangle of scrap metal, prow crushed by impact with Cleve's flagship. Her guns were all long destroyed, and only a single engine still functioned. But a sheer mass had carried her to ultimate victory. The crew aboard, if any still lived, made no attempt to abandon her. Surrender as a concept alien to mankind, as was defeat. Every battle against them now ended in the same way, with every Terran dead, having reaped an unfathomable cost in the process. He saw a streak of fire plunge down with the speed of lightning bolt. He saw the streak of fire plunge down with the speed of a lightning bolt. Then came the mushroom cloud as the ship's antimatter drives exploded. The entire horizon was blinded white, forcing him to shield his eyes. Then came the shaking. It was 4,000 miles from the impact site, yet he felt the force of it, the death rattle of a world. Through violet after images, he peered at the horizon, now hellfire red. He watched a wall of darkness forming as the impact ripped up the planet's crust, pounding it into a wall of dust 100 miles high, and launched it out in all directions at 20 times the speed of sound. Zer had to admire that. Even the Dominion considered planet getters an act of absolute last resort. Now for the Terrans, it was a weapon of first resort. They had realized they had more ships than the Dominion had planets, and in that lay a path to victory. Perhaps Zer thought, if Terra was returned to them, the war would end. But he doubted it. This wasn't about taking back a ruined world. This is about sending a message. The Dominion had shown the wind, and now they must reap the whirlwind. The shockwave hit the base faster than the speed of thought, and Zer became just another mote of dust in the storm. End of story. Yeah, yes, definitely rip the Dominion. One 753-2. 54-2. Story number 2. Story number 2. The Day I Learned the Term Professional Military, written by Bare Minimum Chef. In the entire galaxy, war is fought in a very standardized way. In fact, every war would be fought in 9 distinct phases, in which only the first 5 are relevant to this little story of mine. In the first phase, there is no war. Here exists a mere dispute about something. This could be a border dispute, a trade dispute, or you don't like them. It could be anything really. It could, depending on your standing in the respective society and the power of the standing gives you, just being a fellow diplomat looking slightly funny at you. War is inherently stupid and silly. Therefore, the reasons they are fought are as such. But the most common reasons are that they have something that you want, or they have something that you don't want to exist. For us, it was the latter. In the second phase of war, there exists a conflict of some sort, but no diplomatic conversion yet. In the second phase of the war, there exists a conflict of some sort, but no diplomatic conversation yet. Humans would describe it as being butthurt. Basically, you are stewing either as a nation or as a sufficiently powerful individual in your wants and needs from the enemy, and will show it openly. Maybe through, and I am applying the powerful diplomat analogy here, voting always against a specific diplomat out of principle, ignoring him, making snarky remarks, or even show full-on non-violent hostility. In the third phase of the war, there is, usually instigated by the other party, a diplomatic discussion to resolve the issue in a non-violent way, through an apology or through admissions from the other party involved. In rare cases, you are even here hell-bent to go to war and won't accept any admissions, apologies, or anything other. Pride is a massive factor in this phase, and can let you believe that you have to prove a point. Those are the 3 phases. Those are the 3 pre-phases of full-scale war. No fighting has happened yet, and the war could easily be prevented up until this point. But let's say this has failed. So what is next? But first, my particular case up to this point. In our case, as the Nurzali, we didn't like how our new neighbor was expanding into our territory and settling planets we couldn't inhabit, for which they were paying handsomely and single-handedly boosting our economy nearly 5-fold, as well as preventing major collapse of our banking system, which the humans call a Great Depression. But still pennies in comparison with what they were earning from those planets. The rough estimates of our bankers were that the humans paid us barely 5% of the earnings of those planets if they were to install industry on them. The minerals in the crusts alone would be worth 10 times more than what they were paying us for the right to settle and develop those planets. How dare these barely space flight capable humans? We thought of them as utter cheapskates and portrayed them in our media as such, greedy liars that would get your offspring for a penny if you are not careful. Well, To be fair here, our estimates were off by quite a bit, and we didn't account for all the planets they only settled and did not develop. A prime example of one of those planets would be the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. A prime example of one of those planets would be the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, which they turned into a massive memorial for all of their fallen soldiers, which couldn't be brought back for a proper burial. A concept so foreign that we thought of it as either a military installation or a tourist attraction. We were certain that it was a place made money, somehow. So, as the diplomatic talks were starting, we would not settle for anything less than the utterly beautiful but deadly oxygenated green marble which the tomb... Okay, so just fighting words. So, as the diplomatic talks were starting, we would not settle for anything less than utterly beautiful but deadly oxygenated green marble, which was the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. For humans, it was a paradise beyond comprehension. The largest earthquake would not exceed 1.5, the highest storm wouldn't even count as one on their world, and the most active volcano wasn't due for an eruption for at least another 300 of their years. And even if it did prematurely explode, it would be literally a cakewalk for them to contain the explosion and flowing lava with their shields. The part that made it so deadly for the Noxelli and even if it did and flowing lava. The part that made it so deadly for Nozali. Oop, what did I do there? Sorry, Peanut? The part that made it so deadly for... And, Lazy, did I make a mistake somewhere? Just feel free to call out mistakes. To contain the explosion. Politely. Contain the explosion. Them to contain the explosion. And even if it would prematurely explode, it would be literally a cakewalk for them to contain the explosion and flowing lava with their shields. Yeah. Concentration's not doing too great at the moment, so that does help. Or doesn't help. See, I'm making mistakes in the talking thing as well. It's a often overlooked thing about narration is that you still need to concentrate properly. Yeah, tome and tomb. Been doing too many fantasy stuff, so we've been doing a lot of tomes, not tombs. Flowing lava with their shield. Nah. I take responsibility for my mistakes. Some of them, at least. And flowing lava with their shield. The part that made it so deadly for Nozali was the atmosphere and gravity. With an oxygen level of 20.9% and gravity of 9.8 meters per second, the planet would either poison us with the extreme oxygen levels or crush us in the ground. Grot, our home planet, has an oxygen level of 5.1 and 3.2 meters per second of gravity, is equal to deadly. is equally deadly for a human, if only because they cannot breathe unaugmented. If only because they cannot breathe unaugmented, and our carrier gas is argon instead of nitrogen, which explains the level of oxygen on our world, as it displaces oxygen. So we demanded, yes, demanded, on the top of 90 trillion creds per year, that they would either hand over all of the resources of the tomb, including equipment and manpower, so that we would make the money, or they would increase the pay by our estimates of the income of the planet, which at the time was calculated to be 650 trillion creds per year. Thank you very much, James. It is quite a nice house, although we will be probably moving in September. Yeah. The owner's looking to sell, and we're not really looking to buy just yet. And the asking price is quite high. But yeah. It was only at the end of the war that we learned that the planet was run by a non-profit organization called the Intergalactic Red Cross, and was making no money at all over their running costs due to it being almost entirely staffed by unpaid volunteers and various also unpaid charities. Let's just say this pissed the human diplomat off to the point of ripping the armrests off my guest chair in the office, in an attempt to prevent himself from attacking me. We didn't come to a conclusion which led to the fourth phase of any war, the official declaration of war. The by far shortest phase of any war, especially for us, because we predicted their behavior, and I had the declaration ready and just gave it to the human in response to ruining my chair. It was a beautiful chair. So the fifth phase of war, which incidentally gave us this chapter its name. So the fifth phase of the war, which incidentally gave this chapter its name, the warring factions would build up their armies and prepare to go to the fight. Usually, this is the longest phase because it takes time to conscript and train an entire army. Note the fact that the standing army of all species usually only consists of a skeleton crew manning the bases, spacefaring vehicles and installations, as well as special forces and sufficiently large amount of anti-piracy units. That was where we learned the human term professional military. Of course, it also took them time to gather their troops, but where we would take usually up to 3 years before the first fight occurs, reasoning mentioned above, they attacked us in less than a week. In less than a week, they swiped across our space, and the very same ambassador I handed the declaration of war towards literally waltzed 5 days later, flanked by a platoon of soldiers, into my palace and demanded unconditional surrender. This war or the war over the tomb of the unknown soldier, is still the shortest war in the history of the Galactic Council at the day of writing. This war, or the war of the tomb of the unknown soldier, is still the shortest war in the history of the Galactic Council at the day of writing this, with 4 days, 16 hours and 32 minutes. 2 days of which the humans were traveling to Grot and defeating the planetary defense. And for anyone wondering, the remaining phases of Standard War before the humans completely shattered that process are as follows. 6th phase, preparing and agreeing for a meeting place of the two armies. 7th phase, fighting begins. 8th phase, surrendering of one faction. 9th phase, aftermath and reparations. Excerpt, Memories of the Last King of the Nozali, written by High Imperator, founder of the universe, favorite of the gods, ruler of everything above all. Written by High Imperator, founder of the universe, favorite of the gods, ruler of everything above and below, voice of the people and righteous heir of the godhood, His Majesty Ismail Nazu Lasmia. End of story. Well, the problem with a lot of those gases is if you don't know it's happening, it can kill you so quickly because you don't realize what's happening. And by the time you do, you're not cognizant enough to actually do anything about it. It's the same with carbon monoxide poisoning. It replaces the oxygen in your lungs and you just go kooky and you just can't do anything. It's the silent killer. Well, I mean, argon is used as a antioxidant when welding. I think it would be classified as. So it pushes the oxygen out, stops oxygenation of welds, so that you can better meld two materials together. I know they use argon or carrier gas-based flame suppressant in data centers. A lot of those places are like, look, if there's a fire, do not go in there because you will die. Not from the heat, but from the suppression system. Alright, I'm going to be back momentarily. I leave you with chair and music. Alright, back. Yes, Charles, and not only do I think that, I think it was in response to, 1, being a week ahead, 2, being a Monday, and 3, to keep me on my toes. I know it's a bit extreme, but You know, governments don't do half measures. Unless they do. Oh yes, definitely a perfect trifecta. Gabriel, we're listening to royalty-free music, and then we're going to be listening to me talk, I think. My dog's being weird. Sitting over there staring at me. Come on. Okay. Happy grunts. Is that happy grunts? Okay, happy dog. Ooh. Now we can get back to some work. Okay, on to story number next. It is 2755-1 Earth broke. That's terrifying, Alpha. Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Earth Broke Before the Humans Stood, written by Redundant Fridge. The universe is cruel and thoughtless. The ones that inhabit an endless void can become no different than the natural order of how the planets of existence deem to form. Than the natural order of how the planet's planes. The natural order of how the planes of existence deem to form. When a new species is introduced to the galactic community, there is a process to how the typical actions can play out, and it always ends up becoming skewed depending on who finds them first. Enslavement, trading partners, protectors, many of these actions have occurred for fledgling races from senior species. On rare occasions, a new race is able to brute force their way into gazing eyes of the universe and gain either devout admiration or fearful glances. For humanity, a permanent mistake was committed. Due to the actions of a single race, the Gabberic Kai, who believed themselves to be above the collective and disembodied or disobeyed, who believed themselves to be above the collective and disobeyed the established workings of the galactic community, attacked the humans' mother planet with the sole intent of dominating them. The opposite ended up occurring, and the lesser prepared species won out at a cost. An utter devastation of land and life, the once blue planet, the planet of Earth. The planet Earth broke before the humans ever did. When even their skies sundered to black space, the lights of their ensuing combat against their The lights of their ensuing combat against their adversaries grew stronger, with their population at an all-time low. The remnants of humanity had reverse engineered and salvaged the payloads of technology left by the ones that attacked them, and committed to going off-world with ire and vengeance. Before the galactic coalition of celestial bodies could offer any sort of input, it turned into an extended battle where whatever remained of humanity were now giving their former aggressors hell on their own world. After feigning ignorance and pleading for the assistance of their allies, more alien species got involved with the conflict in a fit of confusion and blind trust. This action compounded the situation where humanity believed that they were truly alone against a cruel universe. To the aliens assisting the Gavarakai, they lacked enough information to understand anything past the assumption that the humans were the aggressors. Thus, the Gavarakai allies joined the camaraderie in a righteous fury. It helped little in the fact that due to the Gavarakai not adhering to first contact rules, no information in regards to human languages were ever properly translated. At least, none that could be offered at the time by our elements involved with past human interactions. Even if we tried to amend anything, even if we attempted to surrender, it would all be futile, as we would all be put to the as we would all be put to the blade. Their tactics were modern and methods primitive. No matter what human tribe it was, they did more than just survive in their enemy's backyard. They thrived. Clashing cultures of humanity, divided by language barriers, but united in bitterness and spite. Even though the Gavarakai had done combat with the humans, they never properly informed their allies about their true capabilities, simply to cover up the fact that they instigated their ordeal. Soon after the combined alien alliance began their military operations, they realized that this was unlike anything they had ever experienced. Stories from theaters and campaigns spread vigorously from the now burning skies of Foray to the two moons smashing against Darsa to absurd legends of the red bird that devoured fleets. Regardless, news of the event signified that the humans were bringing in absolute mutual destruction. They instilled fear unlike any greenhorn or veteran had ever experienced before. Reinforcing the plunge of morale, we never knew how many humans there actually were. And even though our sources had bits and pieces of their language, everyone mutually understood that humanity comprehended there were too many Xenos. That humanity comprehended there were too many Xenos. Thus, they had no qualms about accidental friendly fire. An ultimatum was enacted by the Galactic Coalition of Celestial Bodies for the humans, with the acknowledgement that the Gavarakai was entirely are entirely at fault for what has transpired. They would be held accountable for their foolishness and pride. The issue remained on what to do about the humans. Due to the widespread propaganda and news of humanity's singular mindset of pure ripping and tearing of an entire alliance of alien militaries, they were remarkably feared, held in disdain, dehumanized in the face of an entire endless entropy. Even though it was announced that the Gavarakai were the ones responsible for the endless war, news fell on fearful ears and roaring cries for blood. The ultimatum for humans to appease the masses, absolute genocide of what remained of their species, an unauthorized purging of An unauthorized purging was commenced, an act that hadn't been approved for centuries. In spite of all the advancements done since then, humanity was much more persistent than the last purged subject. An endless campaign of warfare that began with an onslaught that destroyed a planet resulted in a grueling 30 years. 30 years where humanity played a game of attrition and the greatest display of guerrilla warfare to bleed us dry. Up until we stopped getting reports of casualties on our side. That was generally the coalition's only reliable source of information to determine if humanity disappeared from the stars. We recovered reports of the remaining humans' last stand at Drun, which climaxed with them employing a neutron bomb on their own position. It ensured a Pyrrhic victory, for the brave men and women that battled either died now or later, succumbing to the slow agony of neutron radiation poisoning, or they simply got wiped out from existence. Cheers, Kirsten. Have a good one. In the aftermath of the well-fought campaigns, the society we held high was met with difficulties recovering from the human conflicts. The land we purchased with blood, the seas that were tainted with all manner of toxins, the moons that became orbital bombardments, and the unholy war crimes committed on all fronts, by all species, even against each other. The trial for the Garavakai went under the radar, and quietly bypassed the emotional storm of a bloody victory. To refer to humans as death wielders, as monsters, is simplifying and dishonoring their impact on our history, and ignoring our past. It ignores the truths and methods of these madness. It ignores the truths and methods of their madness. It perpetuates and dehumanizes what made humanity fascinating as a species. As with everything, conspiracies arose in time, in future observations of our greatest foe. However, now, it was theorized, other aliens have helped out the humans to ensure they did not maximize damage. How, it was theorized, other aliens have helped out the humans to ensure they did the maximum damage extent possible. How, it should have been impossible for a single fledgling species to trouble some of the greatest military powers our civilization has ever developed. How, the humans had the collective willpower to seemingly bend the impossible feats seen in the old tales of mythos into reality. In regards to all the conspiracy, even if some of it were true, is that same sort of mindset that destroyed entire armies. They refuse to respect the enemy, thus they are driven by their own bias. It also does not alleviate the sin of how poorly the debacle was handled by all parties. The universe is cruel and thoughtless. It ignores all of our plights as mortals, and it gives just as it takes. From what I know now about the human spirit, it's that, like the universal concept of life itself, they find a way. They always do. When the universe believed themselves to be at peace, a poem was sung on a singular circuit. I heard a song at daybreak, so honey-sweet and clear. The essence of all joyous things seemed mingling in its cheer. And one of the universal channels of communication, the words barged in and had priority over all else. A crackling voice, disoriented, a calm. Disoriented and calm, a lost echo in the night beyond. The frosty world about me I searched with eager gaze, but all was slumber-bound and wrapped in a violet-tinted haze. Those who recognized the language, even a little, collectively panicked and went on full battle stations. Both military and civilian communication networks scrambled to figure out where the signal came from. For those who knew, it was the most terrifying poem they hoped to never hear again. Then suddenly a sunbeam shot slanting over the hill, and once again our sky was heard. And once again from out the sky I heard that honeyed trill. The first human vessel to attack the heart of the Gararakai, the first red bird. They named themselves so. The first humans to throw themselves at the remnants of the defending militaries. The vessels that never fell. The ship that endured like the humans, except the vessel was never confirmed to have been fully. Except the vessel was never confirmed to have been felled, only lost. And there upon the poplar, poised at its topmost height, I saw a little singer clad in scarlet plumage bright. An unusual song that was played prior to the first attack. Even when translated, no one particularly knew its meaning. They could try all they want, but only the humans knew why they played it. Even then, those that survived suddenly relapsed into trauma. Reportedly, they kept shuddering and screeching about the red bird and ghost ship. The poplar branches quivered, by dawn winds lightly blown, and like a breeze-swept poppy flower, the red bird rock and stone. The red bird rocked and shone. Only after a group effort of figuring out the signal did the galactic mind open in horror. The signal didn't come from the ruins of Earth, the deepest abyss of space, nor even the final resting place of humanity. The answer was simply everywhere. The blue sky and his feathers flashed over the golden light. Oh, all my heart with rapture thrilled, it was so sweet a sight. The mere fact the signal came to light, from outside anyone's control, and affected us as much as it did, demonstrated one thing. Humanity became the thing that kept us up at night, the evil that haunts every dark corner of our minds. Their memory will never rest, and neither will us. Author, historical archivist Goebel Oskar of the Commander Sivastal Central Galactic Library, Cultural Integrity and Restoration Branch. End of story. Up dooty doot. No, we shouldn't be too much longer, Lazy. One more story, and that should be us. Fair enough. Story number 2. Story number 2. The Fragility of Humans is Dangerous. Written by Dugu Knight. Do not listen to that one. You have to be careful with humans. Yes, they are extremely resilient. They will do things that you think that their bodies cannot. They will seemingly bounce back from things that would kill most races. And they will pursue a person or goal to the point of madness if they find it important. They will weather situations that would make a Trask give up. However, I've seen a human struggle for blow to the head, continue to perform their job with only their customary complaining, then die in their sleep. Did it save lives? Yes. But the human did not even seem aware that they were actually injured, let alone severely. Humans are frighteningly fragile like that, despite their hardiness. Humans are frighteningly fragile like that, despite their hardiness. No, do not look at me like that. I am serious. The human body has evolved to have thresholds. Some thresholds will leave them incapacitated, but others, they may be actively dying, but their bodies are evolved to push all that to the side to make them function. From an evolutionary standpoint, this makes sense. Until they developed tools, they were far from apex predators. Their bodies evolved. Their bodies evolved the dangerous survival trait of ignoring wounds so that they could get to safety. That, however, is not their true fragility. That comes from their minds. Many of the traits that we admire can be just as much of a bane to them as a boon. They may focus to the point that they become completely unaware of their physical condition. Conversely, they may become so hyper-aware of everything around them. Conversely, they may become so hyper-aware of everything around them for sustained periods that their own bodies cannot support the strain of such awareness for extended periods. Yet they cannot, as they put it, shut off. They will push themselves to the point of collapse and still try to do what they must. They will put themselves in situations that they psychologically cannot handle. Or worse. Or worse. Story. You hear the doggy snort? The old man snore? Or worse. We'll enhance. Computer, enhance. Little doggy snort. Handle. Or, worst of all, well, let me give you an example. There was a human that I served with. Her name was, I should not say out of respect for her family, but she liked it when we called her Azure. It had something to do with her hair, but I did not understand. She was a technician on my crew, a good technician, not the best, but valuable, reliable, trustworthy, capable. It was not just her reliability that endeared her to us. She made it a point to learn at least a little of every member's culture. She knew all of the truly important dates for everyone on her team. She knew how to speak to any one of us. She knew how to make our stress more manageable, while she may not have been able to do everything the others could. Puppy, I'm going to need you to stop snoring for at least 5 minutes. While she may not have been able to do everything the others could. While she may not have been able to do everything that the others could, she could enhance all of us just a little bit. She called it force multiplication, making the whole greater than the sum of its parts, a rare thing, even amongst humans. The after report said that the D&L coupling on the slip reactor failed. We did not know what happened at first. Who has ever heard of a D&L coupling failing while the slip reactor was active? I never had. But then again, I would imagine that the majority of the vessel that suffered it are never heard from again. In the time that it took to seal the reactor room, 8 crew members died. When we had a guess as to what had happened, a wrong guess, I might add, we found that the drones were inoperable. Something for smarter people than myself. Someone would have to go into the reactor room to initiate repairs. Our crew chief began to prepare a random way to see who would do it, when she said the 2 most fragile words in her native tongue. The phrase is crass, and not able to be repeated in polite company. You must understand, for humans, there are 2 words that, when together, indicate a complete failure. It means that logic must now go by the wayside, that there is no good answer, but action must be taken. They are the 2 words of ultimate defeat. For any other people, those 2 words would mean that all is lost. For humans, it means casting aside logic and reason and taking whatever course they view as the only one in front of them. Azure insisted that she had this. That she was good, that she could handle this. It was her expression that I remember the most. She was not showing her teeth in the ways humans mean is pleasant. She did not look focused. She did not look concerned. She looked blissful. Her family said. We gave her what protections we could, despite her complaints that they were unnecessary. We asked her for words, and she said that we would have them. She gave them to us. She uttered one of her musical poems the entire time, one about returning home to be a place called Minguli. Computer, tell me what the hell that means, or how to pronounce it. Pronouns. Really don't want to.
Mingule.
Okay. Don't worry, that also blew my eardrums out. Mingule. One about returning home to a place called Mingule. Our doctors figured out the amount of time that she could be in there. Would you believe that she finished the repairs in time? She did. And she stood there staring at the still active reactor, repeatedly reciting her poem. Saline falling from her eye sockets, or so I'm told. We could only listen. The reactor room too dangerous to pull her out. She could have survived if we had, even if we would have died in the process. She would have survived if we had, even if we would have died in the process. The Nell was the first to repeat parts of a song with her. They would not tell us to turn off the audio. They would not let us turn off the audio. The last words of soul carries weight with them. I do not understand the bulk of the poem, and at first I thought it was directed to us. Let her go as it Let her go was often repeated phrase in it. She repeated the poem many times rather than leave to safety. Eventually, we all repeated it in her stead. She was long silent by the time that we could safely enter. Her skin was blackened by that point, and we had to take care that the corpse would not contaminate anyone on the trip back. And yes, we all were there when her remains returned to her kin. One does not save your life. One does not save your life and you not be present when their remains are returned, if you can help it. It was a kin that explained how fragile she was, how her brain did not let her see the good of existence without chemical assistance, how despite an average life, she knew misery like an old familiar acquaintance, and fought to keep others from experiencing it, and of how her last moments were happy that she was being liberated. Ask others and you'll find many tales, how a human will see death ahead of them and commit themselves to it. But in many of those tales, you'll find them performing the impossible, the last stand of the 8th Drop Battalion, the survival of the Zouak, the evacuation to Nok, all of them impossible feats, all of them by humans who gave in to the fragility of probable death and decided. Humans are fragile in ways that make them Humans are fragile in ways that make them dangerous, sometimes to themselves, sometimes to others. A human who utters those two words is doomed to failure or the impossible. You will know what it means when you hear it, but for that reason, you must be careful with them. End of story. Ooh, itchy nose. Yes, it is. Well, we do a wide range of stories here, so it fits.
I think. Ooh, stretch. Okay.
That is going to be me for the day. That is 3 hours and 5 minutes of stream. Thank you all for spending your time with me, even though there was a bot here most of that time. I very much do appreciate it. I will be back tomorrow, same time, same place. Hope you all have a fantastic day. If you are having a day off, I hope you have a great day off. And if you're working, I hope it is quick, smooth, and without incident. I'll see you all tomorrow. Cheers.